Thanks.
All right, we're recording on Zoom for Douglas County, Nebraska Child Youth Services Committee for Thursday, May 22nd, 2025. Please note that a copy of the Open Meetings Act is right over here on the southeast corner of the room. And we do have two agenda items today, one being our standard monthly report for the detention numbers and data, and then second, a discussion on facilities. So we're going to let Dr. Carball come up here and kick off the first agenda item, which is our detention numbers from April 2025.
Good morning, everybody. Today we are talking about our detention population at DCYC as of April 2025. So this first graph shows our average daily population levels. This goes back to January of 2023. Our population of youth charged as adults increased from 34 youth in December of 2024, and we had a fairly decent jump to 43 in January of 2025. Since that time, we've maintained an average daily population of about 44 youth who are charged as adults. So as a result of this, we had more youth charged as adults in detention during February and March than we had youth charged in juvenile court. As of the last week in April, our average daily population of adult court youth was 44, and our juvenile court average daily population was 47. During April, we had a low point of 86 and a high point of 100, and our average daily population was 92. On April 1st, there were 91 youth in DCYC and 96 youth were in detention on April 30th. Our home program screened 8 youth during the month of April. 6 were referred by probation and 2 came from the courts, and 6 of those 8 youth were accepted. 31 youth were released last month after spending an average of 73 days in detention. Included in this group were 3 youth charged as adults who were released after an average of 230 days, 7 predisposition youth released after about a month in detention, and 7 youth who were on juvenile probation and entered detention with new charges. These youth stayed in DCYC for about 86 days. And then we had 12 youth who were on probation admitted without new charges, and they were released after about 46 days. Finally, we had 2 youth held for other jurisdictions, and they stayed with us for an average of 86 days. This graph shows our monthly admission trends since January 2023. We've had more variation in our month-to-month numbers this month than we had during 2024. During April, we had 59 admissions, which is 12 more than we saw during March. Of these 59 admissions, 11 were charged as adults and 47 were charged in the juvenile court. And then we had 1 youth who came from another county. So of those 59 youth who were admitted to detention, 4 were charged as adults, 54 youth were charged in juvenile court, and 1 youth came to us from Sarpy County. The 54 juvenile court youth, 25 were on a predisposition status, 13 received new charges while they were on probation, and 16 were on probation and admitted for a reason other than a new law violation. With regard to the offenses for the 58 Douglas County youth, 8 were admitted for weapons-related offenses, 30 had non-weapon-related felonies, 1 had a non-weapon-related misdemeanor, and 19 were admitted with technical violations or for reasons other than a new law violation. For those 8 youth who were admitted with charges related to weapons, all 8 youth had charges involving a firearm. 1 was charged in adult court. 5 received new charges while they were on probation, and 2 were in a juvenile court predisposition status. 5 youth were in possession of firearms, and 3 actually used the firearm during the commission of their offense. 6 of the firearm-related offenses were felonies, 3 were use, and 3 involved possession. And then the other 2 firearm misdemeanors were for possession charges. And you can see the additional charges on their offense incidents listed here as well. For the 30 youth admitted to DCYC on non-weapon related felonies, only one was charged in adult court and the remainder were charged in the juvenile court system. 22 were predisposition and 7 received new charges on probation. About half of these youth were admitted for drug possession, theft, or assault charges. The other felony, non-weapon felonies include conspiracy to commit a Class 2A felony, criminal mischief, drug distribution, burglary, arson, assisting suicide, robbery, and terroristic threats. We had one non-weapon related misdemeanor. That was only one youth. They received these charges while they were on probation and they were admitted for criminal mischief. Then finally, we had 19 youth admitted to DCYC during April for reasons other than new law violations. 2 were charged as adults. 1 was in a predisposition status in juvenile court and 16 were on juvenile probation. With regard to the reasons for admission, 6 had unlawful absences, 5 lost their placements, 3 had failed to appear in court, 2 violated the terms of their probation, and the remaining had issues related to paying court fines and costs, violating court orders, or they had an order to be detained by the court. The underlying offenses for which these youth originally came into the system, again, vary pretty wildly. We do have some felony level offenses, and we have misdemeanor level offenses. Included in the felonies are terroristic threats, assault, disorderly conduct, shoplifting, sexual assault. And then some examples of the misdemeanor level offenses include criminal mischief, assault, theft, unlawful occupancy, flight to avoid arrest, and drug distribution. I'm sharing on screen.
That's good now.
Yeah, thank you. You're welcome. And that is what I have for the data this meeting. Oh, apologies. Didn't print those slides out. Okay, so I do have 2 more slides. So the first is our snapshot population. So as of this Monday, we had 94 youth in detention. 3 were admitted from other jurisdictions. All were Sarpy County. 1 was in on adult related charges and 2 were in on juvenile court charges. We do have 42 youth who are in detention as of Monday for charges in the adult court system and 49 with charges in the juvenile court system. Of those 49, 17 are on a predisposition status. The other 32 are on probation. Our population is overall 92% youth of color, with the majority being Black. We do have 18% of our population being Hispanic and 12% of the population identifying as Asian. We also had 90% of our population being male and 10% dually involved in the criminal justice and child welfare systems. And then finally, we had 12 youth in detention as of Monday with court orders to be released once an appropriate placement has been found. On average, these youth had been waiting about 27 days. They are waiting for a variety of placement types. We have about 9 youth who are waiting for shelter or who are able to go to shelter while they are pending placement in a higher level, either group home or PRTF. We had 2 youth who are waiting specifically for a PRTF placement and 1 waiting for placement in an extended family home. And again, you can see the underlying charges for these youth on the right-hand side of the slide. With regard to felonies, we have accessories, attempts, and conspiracies. Related offenses, we have assaults, firearm possession, firearm use, sexual assaults, terroristic threats, and thefts. And then some of the misdemeanor offenses that we have include assault, disturbing the peace, firearm possession, obstructing peace officers, and unlawful occupancy.
Thank you, Dr. Carball. We're gonna do 2 separate discussions. The first discussion is gonna be just on the data we just went through. That focuses mostly on April and a brief snapshot of May 19th as well. And then we'll jump into the next agenda item, which is the facilities. So first discussion on the data. Dr. Carball and others are here that can help with any questions on that end. Kim, quick question for you. If somebody speaks from the room, let's say back there, does the Zoom still pick it up? on the microphone? Are there room?
Green on this one.
Yeah, because I don't, ideally, the recording will pick up everybody's conversation, not just who's up here.
Let me tell.
My gut tells me you should be equipped.
Yeah, because we've had other, like JDA meetings in here, for example, and I think there's a microphone that picks up the whole room. I just want to make sure it does, or if you want to ask somebody, but we'll still start the conversation here for time purposes.
If you want to test it, I
Looks
can
like
tell you if I
it's
can
a
hear it.
Microphone picking it up. Oh, Leah's talking.
I just said, if you want to test it, I can tell you if I can hear.
Okay, yeah, she said that we want to test it. So. Could you, somebody in the back there, say a few words?
Good morning, my name is Wayne Brown. I'm the president and CEO of the Urban League of Nebraska. I'm glad to be here and seeing the data that you're sharing with the community.
Thank you, Wayne. Leah, did you hear that?
All good, yes, loud and clear.
Oh, she heard it. Okay, thank you, Leah. Good thought there. All right, it's working. Cool. Very good. In that case, questions on the data from April and May, Commissioner Cavanaugh?
Just a quick question on page 4. We have monthly DCYC admissions by court type. But it doesn't give us a couple of things. A total, I mean, I can do the math, but I appreciate total on that. And then a look back beyond the 2023, which would give us an idea of where those admissions were prior to and during the process where the kids' jail was considered and constructed. So if we could, going forward, get a better view going back and then get a running total, I think that would give us an idea of where this average daily population of 92, with today's population at 94, was and is from before the entire process started, during the process, and where we are today. I mean, I think my suspicion is based on the projections that we had going into this, we knew prior to the construction of the kids' jail that it was going to be too small for our purposes and inadequate. But I appreciate that. Also, I don't know, I think Mark LaFleur is on here. Is there anybody here from the youth center staff?
Randy is on the way.
Mark, you're on Zoom, correct?
That's correct.
There he is. Hi. Mark, today's population is 94, is that correct?
That's correct.
I'm not getting audio.
Yeah, we're trying to work on the audio for the Zoom speakers, but he did say that is correct.
Yes.
And, you know, maybe you could help us with this admissions question that, you know, underlies the whole average daily population question. We could break it out that way, but it would be better to have context that shows before, during, and after the construction phase that we'll talk about later. Could you do that for us, please?
Sure could.
And then I think the majority minority population, if I'm correct, looking at these figures, is 92%. Is that correct? I don't know who's.
That's what the slide says, yes.
92%, okay. And again, having that historically so that we can get a view of that, it's troubling that we have this huge majority minority population. And I suspect that that's true over time, but that is so disproportionate to the demographics of our community's population or the county's population relative to race that it's one of the more troubling statistics coming out of here. But it would be good if we had a snapshot of that that shows us, has any progress been made on this? Has any difference been made on this? Or are we just consistently locking up this overwhelming majority of minority kids?
All right, they have their data orders to get some historical data on them.
Thank you.
All right, other questions or comments on the April data? Commissioner Rogers.
Yeah, so I just want to, correct for the record. The statement to say that you knew that the
capacity was gonna be over is a false statement. I mean, if you look at slide 10, slide 10 clearly tells you when the process started. State law went into effect in 2018 and said, you consider placement, consider detention for lack of placement, and when it went into effect 18, we had a year to adjust to it. So if you clearly look at the date, you know, nobody's enforcing that piece of it. Then you add in to that count, the, you add into that count on page 10, the predisposition kids that the board has jurisdiction over, and we can make some adjustments to do that. You get there to some degree. And just know for the record, at no point has any data showed an average daily population over a year of 92. Now, there's been fluctuations, and you see how that fluctuates up and down. So I just want that to know for the record, since comment was there, that that's in the record, and that's I think the more accurate view.
Thank you. Other questions or comments on the April data?
Yes, I have a couple questions. One about predisposition, youth of color, and then placements. But I also want to really start with the initial premise that this center is too small. I want to say I disagree with that as a community member, that I would prefer to be more programs for those in predisposition. So I would say the number is just right. And so I would hate to start with the premise that we are looking to have bigger facility, looking at lock up more kids, and looking at the demographic issues here with 62% of the population being Black, with only about 11% in the city being Black, and 18% Hispanic, with 15% in the city being Hispanic, and then 12% Asian, and only about 4% in the city. And so that's concerning that is the starting proposition, that it's too small. But my question is about predisposition. In the 33 days, these kids are waiting to be moved. What does that mean, predisposition? And what kind of kids are in that pool of kids that are waiting to be placed?
Who wants to take the first run at that one?
Do that. So the predisposition youth, those are youth who are admitted into juvenile court and they don't have any other court systems going on. So these are it's kind of their first time in juvenile court. They're not under the supervision of probation. They have no other services going on in the system.
So the Urban League of Nebraska is really looking at eliminating that racial wealth gap. And so education is a big part of that. 33 days seems a bit excessive for that population. Is that average? Is that the number they length of stay for a youth in that particular position? That seems like we're causing a bit of harm with that length of stay.
So our overall length of stay for youth in juvenile court, including the probation youth, is about 46 days. So I can stop.
Thank you.
If we look at the adult prison population and how we handle that as any indication, we could find ourselves in a situation where we're trying to build our way out of this. We did that with the adults, and what we found was those basic premises of the minorities and everything. Still, we never dealt with the causes. So that's what we did. We locked them up. I spoke maybe 4 years ago to a lot of the commissioners about restorative practice. That was a solution to go upstream. We were able to do that. We're doing it now with the help of Mary and DC Weiss. It's a lot going on that's positive. I'll let these guys even address that. But I'm in there as my program. Restoratively, these guys are processing. This never happened before. We've never introduced victim impact or empathy to them kids, showing the vast impact of what they were doing. We never sat down and asked them their needs. which reach far into family and different values and a lot of different things. And we never really wrapped ourselves around it. What that means is some of the kids are telling us right now that they need their hand held. They say, I want to do better, but every time I get out, this happens. So with those things in place, and we're moving in that direction now, finally. You know, thank you, Mary. Because we're seeing the results. And I will let Mark and Rondi speak to that. They there every day. I'm in there with the program. My staff is there. DCYC staff is there. We're seeing the change. So I say all this to say, if we're moving in a restorative way, we will be right where we need to be and hopefully reducing that population so we don't fall into that trap, because that trap takes us down the road of how do we staff it? I mean, so the more we move in that direction, it creates more of a situation where the restorative process is something that's preparing us and going upstream to deal with these issues that is basically driving the behavior of these kids. So with the new facility, we can reduce that down. We're probably a few years behind. But right now, with what we have going on in DCYC, and I always say this and I'll leave it here. We've always had motivators, we've always had teachers coming, we've always had preachers coming. My program was not about none of that. Our program was to come to hear from the kids and also to teach them what they're doing in the community. The vast impact all the way down to the taxpayers and people right now debating on spending money to lock them up. When we're not asking them how did they get there, what is the behavior, what's driving the behavior? We're just looking to lock it up. We did the same thing with their dads and their moms. And we did, and look at Lincoln. We can't even staff the places. So I mean, if we look at it from a rational point of view, if we put more programs in place that's sustainable, we work together, because we have about 75% probation failures. We got to ask ourselves, did they get the programs that they need? So if we actually getting them the programs, because this program is going to wrap around them. We're in court. The kids ask us to be there. They don't have people there. So the next step is when they come out of DCYC, how do we wrap ourselves around them? We're in there building a relationship. Somebody has to connect us. We got to have a good pass off, so we can work together. Where probation says here. Now we got to look at those services. They've been here for years. I go back 40 years. I went through Boys Town and I ran, I this and that, and then I landed in DCYC and nobody wanted. Nobody would take. So I sat in there, I don't know how long. So this is the thing, but nobody said, Roscoe, what's going on? Why are you behaving this way? We don't get that exposed anyway. So I didn't want to drill on this, but I really truly believe, I talked to the commissioners about this 4 years ago. You guys know it. We can, this building, this new building would be perfect if we put the right programs in place and wrap around these kids. It's right there right now. The type of people that these kids need to see when they come out of DCYC, the ones that can handle that capacity. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. Over there.
I just want to second what Roscoe said about restorative justice and restorative healing. Like part of the main talking points I've encountered when individuals say that we need to detain youth is that they need to learn the consequences of their actions. They need to learn their lesson. They need to feel sorry. The thing is that incarcerating these youth doesn't actually help the psychosocial development. There are numerous studies that show this. There's a study from 2019 that shows this. I could send this to anyone who's interested. But the point is that like this only delays things like high school graduation, learning these valuable lessons of psychosocial development, learning how to restore communities, because we're just having these kids sit here. So again, I just want to second what Roscoe is doing and what numerous community partners are doing is that like we have the people in the community that have gone through these experiences and are experts in these youth behaviors, in these youth experiences. So really, I would love to see, if we are going to open up this new DCYC center, to make it a radically different space from what it previously existed, where again, like Terrell McKinney talked about, in LB 430, having community partners in the building and making it a space where these kids have community partners that can wrap their services around them. Because we want the kids to actually learn these lessons, or else we're just increasing recidivism rates, which numerous national studies show, you know, these incarceration that increases recidivism rates and doesn't lower it. So I just want to second what Roscoe said and say that we have people in the community that are already doing the work. We just need to be in the space doing the work.
Thank you. Just as a reminder, we will jump into the facility discussion after the data discussion. So this is about the April data. Anybody have any final questions on the April data before we jump into the facility discussion?
This is April data and data in general. Where can we find information on the family makeup or dynamic of these youth that are incarcerated or on probation?
So that would depend on what we track at intake and other parts of the system. So I would ask my partners if there's any way to measure that or if that's being measured.
Not sure, but explain.
So a single youth that's incarcerated or put on probation comes from a home.
Right.
I don't know if they're being taken care of by grandma, mom, dad, both parents, single parent, etc. So that's what I'm asking: foster care, ward of the state, etc. So I haven't seen that data. We talk about it. We talk about the youth, but we don't talk about the family dynamic. And I know that a lot of family support work is being done. However, I'm just interested to know how many of these youth are coming from different homes.
Yeah, I don't have a button I can click to produce that. I can tell you that over 10% of the children on probation are state wards.
Where can I find that data though? That's what I'm very interested
Yeah,
in,
I don't-
specifically that data.
I don't know. Where you can find it exactly.
Okay.
I know that these monthly reports are put on our website and accessible to anyone. Then we can inquire as to other data points that we can provide you.
Does DCYC have that? I know they do an intake. Oh, we do not have that. Okay. Does probation have that information? They do intake as well.
There is
That's
for
me.
information.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have a button.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nonetheless, the family dynamic is a piece of the overall situation and solution.
Yeah, I was just, we haven't talked about the data on room isolation. I know I sent out the information from Jennifer Carter from the Inspector General. She tracks all of the room isolation. I'm really concerned about the legislation passed at the prison level to eliminate or really reduce the use of room isolation because of the severe mental health problems that creates, and using it for juveniles is much worse than the effect it has on adults, which is still not good. But do you have the data on that? Where are we at? Because just curious on what progress we're making, how these facilities are affecting the use of room isolation. I remember in her report, she talked about how that number was up, and I assume part of those numbers come from your facilities here. Is anybody tracking that, or how do they report that to the Inspector General?
Sure. In a moment, I'll toss it to our DCYC director, Rondi, in the back there. But I do want to mention that, you know, all this is a fine balance between the conceptual and philosophical goal that we do want to strive towards and the practical reality on the ground of what is going on day to day in our facility and in the community and otherwise. And so what I mean by that is that, first of all, room isolation is not what we would see like on a TV show or in a movie where there's a black hole somewhere and you throw them in there and there's no windows and there's no light and they stay in there for days. That's not what room isolation is. So I just want to clarify that notion that some may have. Also, the practical reality is that if you have, so we know there's gang affiliations and we know there's tensions in the facility, right? We can't deny that. And so every once in a while, there is physical harm caused from one youth to another youth, if not a group of youth targeting another youth. And so if you have, you know, 1 or 3 or 5 youth physically attacking another youth, they're gonna be isolated into their room, which has windows and lighting and a clear wall that faces the inner kind of social area. And because what else are you gonna do in that moment? Are you gonna let them keep attacking each other? Or does everybody need a bit of a break in their respective rooms, which again are fully lighted and can have visuals to the social area? So first, let me toss it to Rondi for further context and then Commissioner Rogers.
Yeah, the idea that these kids are placed in isolation and there's some isolated part of the facility where they don't have contact with folks is a misconception. That's the stress.
The data that, you had the data. I just
The
asked
the
for
data that you had is what you would have gotten from the state.
No, that was for the whole state. What about for your?
Our facilities, they're individually broke down in that.
It's not here. I'm asking for it
Oh, it's
here.
not here. I don't have it on here.
That's what I'm asking for. Where's the data here?
Yeah, you'd have to go back.
The overcrowding affects, in the state prisons, overcrowding led to use of isolation for the same reasons. Overcrowding is an issue here. That's why I'm trying to look at the parallels with overcrowding and how that's being managed, because feedback I've gotten from people that have been inside that facility is that the isolation is pretty damaging. But I'm just asking for the data. If it doesn't happen, then the data will show that. But what data do you give to the Inspector General? You should have that here, I would think.
I'm assuming we do send it to Inspector General.
General, if you go onto that website,
And
you
if there's-
see it's individually broke down by each
Well, I've already
facility.
done that, but it's not for here. I didn't bring that. It's not my job to bring it here.
This meeting wasn't about that, so we. didn't-
No, it was about that. It was about isolation, the effect of overcrowding in these facilities.
No, it wasn't.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'm confused.
But I mean,
Like,
some of what you're saying does speak to the notion of, what is the right operational capacity to have in any facility, whether it's the old one or a new one or anyone, where you don't want to be, at the max capacity because of some of the reasons you've stated. But that's, not the focus of the meeting today. Commissioner Rogers?
Yeah, I mean, I want to build on what Rodney and Roger are saying. And I want to build this in the defense of the facility, because Roscoe made a point about trying to compare the adult to the juvenile piece, and you got some of these numbers. Where if you compare adult to juvenile, that's the reason we're building a mental health wing on Denton, because mental health is not supposed to be the counties. Mental health is supposed to be the states. And so because of that lack, so we adjusting to that. I think the argument for me in defense of DCYC on this is, like Roger said, that definition is a little different. But the fact is, just in the data you saw today, you got 15 kids that are waiting on orders. Okay. So that means they're supposed to leave. And they can't leave because there's not a service. And then you got those mental states. And so the question really is, to my point to defend the staff, is that they're probably dealing with a degree of kid that they shouldn't deal with, because the facility is not set up to handle some of this. So the real question to me to ask is, you're putting the staff in a bad position to handle the kids that's supposed to be outside in a place. And DCYC is not set up to do that. You're supposed to be there for a period of time. You're supposed to be in a place. And so that's the question that I will frame it as, and the question probably should be asked. You putting the staff in a position to handle a kid that they're not supposed to be equipped to, and they're supposed to be out in service. And that's what, to me, is another point to drive. You gotta get them out of here and get them somewhere where they get the appropriate care, and not put the staff in that position.
I can actually say that our numbers were, our use of restrictive housing was higher when our count was low. Since our count has went up, we've actually seen a decrease because of the utilization of what the county has allowed us to use, which was Bible Healing and all the community partners that come in the facility. So we have a gang and gun coordinator that's in there. We have excellent staff. We have a lot of mental health staff that are working with you. So we are seeing a decrease. And we're seeing a lot of positive things taking place. So the story that these kids are all being isolated, the reason the kids were being in isolation, as it's described, which is really restrictive housing, is because there's a lot of violence in the facility. And that violence stems from things that take place in the community. And then the violence in the facility spills over into the community. So what we're focusing on is trying to reduce the violence so we can reduce the restrictive housing. Because we have to keep kids safe. And we also have to be worried about the victims in the facility. And parents get real upset when they know that their son is a gang member and other youth are trying to attack them. And their kid gets attacked, and then we immediately let those same youth out. And they're still on the unit with that youth. So there's so many factors in place that take place to how we use restrictive housing to try to manage the facility. So it's not simple, and people overgeneralize what's taking place, and until you come and you spend a day there and you try to manage it, then you would understand what's taking place. And we have community partners that come in, and once they come in, they see what's taking place, they understand what we're doing, and then they help us to reduce the violence, they help us to reduce the restrictive housing. So we do have community partners who come to the facility.
Give me a 5-second break. We're gonna test the audio on the Zoom because it was very low before. Mark LaFleur, can you talk for 5 seconds?
I sure can. That's easy. Things are going pretty well over here today. So good to see everybody.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, that's good, Mark. Thank you so much. It's still very low for some reason for us. We're gonna keep playing with the volume while we continue the discussion. So yeah, we have our tech guy here that's working on it. In the meantime, okay, we're trying to finish out the April data conversation because I know a lot of you want to speak to the facility conversation. So Wayne has the hand up.
My last one for me about data, spent at page 11. When I want to thank the staff, what you do in the community partners, which is why my demeanor's a little bit more frustrated than I typically am, if you've known me. You got great community partners out there doing that work. But on page 11, I'm looking at that youth release orders, and I'm looking at 27 days. I'm just saying there needs to be more funding around community partners that can take that piece in. 27 days again we talk about folks who should be gone. I mean, again, that's education miss, that's socialization. I mean, I just want to thank the system for what it does. I thank the community partners for what they do. But I just want to say 27 days it's just unacceptable.
Yeah, and to that note, real quick, like you're 100% not wrong, you're 100% right. Now it's a matter of the intricacies of why and the complexities behind placement. For one, like capacity, for example. Like if we have a residential facility that says, hey, we're at capacity, we can't take more kids right now, that could contribute towards more waiting time. If we have a facility that says, the level of risk this kid is, we don't want to take them. That can contribute towards more waiting time. The fact that the bulk majority of all of these providers are private providers, private nonprofits, private corporations, and they have a right, so to speak, to say no and not take the youth. We can't control that. I'm not saying we don't need to work on it, because we do need to work on it collectively as a community amongst all partners and systems to try to build capacity, to try to reduce the waiting that these youth have to wait. But there is a level of complexity and angles that we need to work on and realize that there's capacity issues, there's partners that say, no, we're not going to take that youth for whatever reason. So it's not a matter of like, yeah, we want the kid to wait longer because we want to punish them more. Like nobody's trying to do that. And I know that's not what you're saying. There is reasons why it stalls, and it's not good that it stalls, it's bad that it stalls, but there are things we can work on to try to make that better.
See, Sam, what about the partners that will take? So that's the issue more with me, is there's partners out, so that's more or less a trust issue for me, just to be honest. You have to trust in those partners, just like she trusted in the process. So we have to get that piece right there down, the trust in the people, and look at us as the experts.
I agree with you, Roscoe.
So that's what he's saying right there. There's some people that's ready to do it, not the ones that's rejecting them, because they can run, they can get loud, and there's certain places that's not going to take them based on that. They're around guys like this guy, myself, different key.
Yeah. No, we do need more high-risk service provision. And I think there's a good amount of consensus around that. But specifically, these youth who are authorized to be released and waiting, like who here has a psychiatric residential treatment facility? Like a lot of these are very specialized and it's gonna take some effort to build capacity in some of these specialized areas that they're authorized to be released at. So it's not that there's not people willing to step up to work with the youth, but sometimes the authorization for release is to a specific kind of facility. And that's the capacity we need to work on, collectively, I think. Larry, and then, I'm sorry, Leah, and Larry first.
I'm gonna make pretty soon, but some of you've heard part of this before when I was at, council meetings. Working. I have a grandson that's been system enrolled for many years. I can tell you, one of the biggest problems is the privacy laws. Privacy laws prevent people from discussing things two ways. Therefore, they never really wanted to know what I knew about my grandson. What I knew he was capable of or not capable. So they never wanted to ask. Not interested, you're not part of the team, oh, you are, but you really can't say anything because of the privacy. Never discussed with other family members. How do you come up with a workable program when you haven't talked with the people that really know that and understand the kid? Yes, they're not lawyers, but they know what the kids can or can't do. Now, in my day, the community took care of things. That was a community that we had peanut rain all over town and cut across people's property. But if we did something wrong, by God, the telephone would ring. And then you'd probably go to the woodshed. My mother used to make me cut my own little switch. But the community took care of those things, and so did the schools. Today, that's been taken away from them by outsiders that have best practices. Not necessarily best practices for us here, not for that kid that's up on that floor. Because some guy in Chicago wrote a best practices paper, doesn't make it successful. So stop throwing money at programs by outsiders that don't know your kids here no more. And let the family be a big part of it and listen.
Thank you, Larry. We're gonna go here.
Yeah, 2 hands on mine.
You might be trying to help with the audio still. Or maybe not. Mark, if you wanna try to talk, we're gonna test the audio again.
Sure. Just wanna bring up a couple of
It's
stats.
still very low, Mark. I'm so sorry. We're not gonna be able to hear you, at least at the moment. We're gonna keep working on it with our tech guy here. I will loop back around to you, Mark. Let me get a question here.
2-part question, just if the answer is the way it is. Some of those children who are waiting for placement, are they waiting for placement because of their living condition? Like you're found, they end up with some charges, but you find out that home's is not safe. Are some of those children waiting for living conditions to be stable?
Who wants to take that one? Mike.
I think it's twofold. Unfortunately, we have some kids that are state boards that are waiting placement but probation does not look at the family home. When they have a legal guardian and a parent to go to, it's not because they're unsafe to be in that system. And so those are the kids that probation search are kids that can go back to their home. However, unfortunately might have, they're in detention for a community safety factor, if that makes sense.
So detention is specifically for those, so.
That are
where they
community
don't-
safety.
Yeah, and so it's not assessed whether the home is safe or not.
Correct,
So you
that
can
is
send it
not-
back and it is what it is.
We'll implement the services and everything to keep them in the home if that's where they can be, but probation is not the system to look whether or not that home is on.
Who assesses that? So if they're assigned to a provider or whoever, and that person gets there and is like, hey, home's just not safe. This is why this kid's in the street. How does that get discovered? Or does it get discovered?
We would report that to Health and Human Services, and then that is their obligation to go and assess that home.
Who's we?
Probation or the provider would report it.
Thank you.
Yes. Was there one back here?
Yeah, first I just want to say, I appreciate the forum that you all have created for the commissioners and having this discussion. I think we're at a different point now, kind of echoing some of the points around community partners that are really looking to be even more part of the solution. Bringing what the community has requested as far as even more cultural competency, work with the kids and the whole family. So I think we're at a really unique point. I just want to offer to the commissioners, I appreciate you opening up the door to allow these conversations to happen. There's more partnerships happening between the community and probation and DCYC and law enforcement. And there's more data to the study that Kim and her group done in the last year. So on the data, a few points I just wanted to emphasize. One, just going back to what Leo asked, is if we could know a little bit more about the demographics and families of the young people. What do they have in common? I remember a conversation with Kim some years, maybe a year ago, about what do we know specifically about the families and where can we get that additional data to augment what we have? What are we seeing in common? I've heard a number of times that the services or placements that are needed, if that's in the data somewhere, I see on page 11, that might be where it's headed, Commissioner Brock. But could we get more information specifically about what's missing so those kids cannot be placed? And so that would be really helpful. And just to reemphasize a few things, well, this gets probably more to the facility, but there's some recommendations that we've been gathering from the 360 group, hundreds of partners and agencies around facility, but those are just some points on data that I think would be really helpful. What do we know specifically about the individuals and their families? What demographic information? What services are missing that we could, as a community, help support and wrap around, and reemphasizing that it is about the whole family, and we're here to help as far as community-based agencies.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Will. All right, we're about halfway through our time, so I do want to move to the second part of the agenda, which is the facility discussion.
Sure.
Yeah.
Can you check the chat? Some people are asking.
Check the chat, okay.
See if there's a
Thank you. We'll check it here quick.
Okay, they're saying there's none. Well,
Mark, you got Mr. Mason voice.
One of the thought was, I'm not sure if he could call in on the phone, as far as the volume, because
Oh.
what he has to say would be incredibly valuable in the conversation on this.
Yeah,
okay,
or,
they're saying there's not a section in there. Okay.
okay,
So I asked.
yeah, it might be.
There is no chat feature activated.
But Mark, if you wanna text Rondi, they work closely together. Rondi can share your sentiments. Sorry about that. We're still working on the Zoom audio. For the speakers that are trying to speak through Zoom. Okay, setting up the context here for facility options that we're gonna jump into here in a second. So this is an attempt to bring board, public, everybody up to date on the options that have been presented in recent history. And also going back a few years as well. So pretty much everything on the table in regards to tangible options that have been brought up 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 1 month ago. And we're just gonna have a discussion on those options. Today is not the day to make a decision. Today is not a day that we're voting. Having a discussion, all the options that have been brought up the last 5 years in regards to facilities. When I say facilities, I'm talking about 2 buildings. I'm talking about DCYC at 42nd and Woolworth, which Rondi is in charge of. And talking about the facility downtown next to the court system here, which is also built as a youth detention facility as well. It is currently vacant, but we're gonna have a discussion on both, right? And so we'll open up dialogue, comments, questions. When I run through the options, it's not a long presentation, it's pretty short, but I'm trying to capture the essence of each option. The first one will be the original plan, which I just wanted to capture through what others pitched, 5 years ago, however long ago. I think the first pitch at the board meeting was in 2018, actually. So I put the YouTube link there if anybody wants to go back and watch that meeting, where we had Bruce Carpenter come and do a long presentation on the proposal. Councilman Gray was there, other speakers spoke to the facility proposal as well at that meeting. So capturing some snapshots from that, capturing some snapshots from the Chin study. That was a big emphasis for that facility as well. So we're gonna get to that slide. Oh, you wanted me to test it? Okay, Mark, can you try talking again, my friend? Or Leah, somebody.
Test, test, test.
Ooh, perfect. Yeah, nice and loud. Thank you. Can you do it one more time?
Test 1, 2, 3.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It appears to be working now. Thank you, Bob. Okay, let's jump into here and anybody, so myself and a couple other commissioners were not even on the board when the original plan was pitched and voted on. So anybody who was that would like to give additional context is welcome to give additional context. Once we get to that slide here. Okay, yeah, so I didn't want to gloss over the original plan because it is technically one of the options and it was the main option for a long time. So there was of course, a long dialogue on building the Justice Hall Center, which is we're currently in right now, houses probation, courts, county attorney, county defender, and a portion of that entire bond and the entire project was the detention facility downtown, which is in the southwest corner of this corridor here. So that detention facility, the plan was to try to transition our youth to that facility. There were some moving targets, but one of those primary targets was July 2023 at one point. The benefit of being closer to courts and probation was pitched as one of the benefits for the downtown facility. There was an emphasis on providing more therapeutic environment through lighting and just the colors inside, etc. There was a goal of reducing detention numbers while increasing community programming to help reduce the detention numbers at that time. So we're talking about 2018. So one quick quote from the video in 2018 came from Mr. Bruce Carpenter in regards to the goal of having a 3-year time frame between at the same time that all this was being built, there was to be an effort to create and launch more robust community programming. And the goal was for that programming to reduce the numbers. That way, by the time the facility is set to open, the numbers will be lower and everything will be fine, right? Conceptually. So that was the goal. So there were multiple partners involved, including one philanthropic partner. So some of the contingencies involved in all of this was that we do indeed move all of our youth downtown, and that would trigger a $5 million contribution towards the building, which is separate from a $5 million contribution towards programming. So since the original Woolworth facility has not been closed down, the $5 million towards the building has not been contributed. So that comes into play also in the next slide and option number 2 that I'm going to talk about here shortly. And again, we can circle back if anybody wants to add context to this, because I don't want to speak for anybody per se. So the dual facility consideration / option, there was one point in mid 2023, specifically in October 23, I think is when the board passed the resolution that would take us towards a 2-facility model where we would run the original Woolworth facility and the downtown facility simultaneously for the foreseeable short term. So this was not meant to be like a 50-year plan. This was meant to be maybe a 1 to 3 year plan where hopefully the numbers would go down eventually. And perhaps we could move into the downtown facility solely rather. But at the same time, we would keep open enough capacity to address what the numbers have realistically been within the last 3 years, which have been more in the 80s and 90s for youth in detention. So I was a part of drafting this resolution and kind of spearheading this as a compromise. So I'm giving you my raw logic here, where the compromise, at least in my mind, was that the 2-facility model would allow for the new facility to get up and running, which I would imagine some of the original proponents would like to see. But it also addressed the concern for having enough capacity for the numbers that we've been seeing in recent history, right? Because while we're all striving to reduce those numbers, realistically, they're not gonna go down overnight from this week to next week, right? It's gonna take a little bit of time to come together, create those programs and work with partners. So I saw this as a compromise, right? We have enough capacity between both facilities, but we're putting the new facility into motion. So that was the idea. It did pass with the board. But this was passed before we knew what was gonna happen in 2024 with the legislature. The legislature started to look at ways to limit and bind local revenues, local budgets, local spending for cities and counties, which ultimately culminated in the 2024 special session that the legislature had called by the governor, where they implemented 0% caps on our local funding and tax growth. And so there's intricacies and all that, so I'm not doing it justice because you know, Lori, our finance director, and other people can explain the intricacies behind that 0% cap, but they were really looking to reel in, if we're speaking politically, reel in local and city and county spending, which really put a bind in how we would pursue our own budgeting in the future. On top of that, they've been looking at other ways to reduce our local funding at the county level, the legislature and the governor, which they've looked at reducing or eliminating the inheritance tax, which brings in about $20 million a year for the county here in Douglas County. That comes up every year. It seems to be getting more steam every year. We hope that it doesn't go away because it helps a lot of our health and human service programs, but it's constantly on the docket. So we're trying to be very careful about what we do because from a budget perspective, because of everything that's going on with the legislature and the cap that they put on us, because we had our DCYC staff run the numbers on what it would cost to run that second facility. These numbers were run about a year and a half or 2 years ago at this point. And the estimates at that time were to partially open the facility would be about 4.5 million, and to fully open the facility with all 4 floors would be $7 million extra on top of what we're already paying to run the Woolworth facility. So in the current budget climate, that gave us great pause to really, you know, launch a second facility budgetarily speaking, to pay those extra 4.5 to $7 million on top of, you know, having to find the staffing for that second facility. So if you want more details on like the numbers crunch and the ramping up of staff and everything behind that, Rondi and his team are able to provide a little bit more insight into that. But that was kind of the gist of the dual facility model. There's also been a nonprofit that has reached out to us about the Woolworth facility. They have interest in utilizing a portion of it. One option is like a third of it, one option is like 2/3 of it, more or less. And they would lease the space to use the Woolworth facility. Though I would add the caveat that if they take a good chunk of that facility, that would likely trigger us to have to use a piece of that facility and the downtown facility, which gets us back into the budgetary bind that I just talked about. But since it is technically an option on the table, I wanted Kim, who's had the most communication with Rite of Passage, the nonprofit, to explain that option briefly. And then after that, there's only one more we're going to talk about, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So the Rite of Passage option.
Very briefly, as you can tell from this slide, Rite of Passage is a private organization. They've been in juvenile justice for over 40 years. They've been partnering with Douglas County since 2003. They are the entity that currently owns Utah Holly Academy in Omaha as a group home shelter, mainly for girls. They operate currently across the country in 18 different states with 75+ programs, from detention facilities to psychiatric residential facilities. They do the whole gamut across. What they proposed there are 2 different options that they proposed. Looking at our data, they're very familiar with our community, so they had option A. And that would be to use some portion of the Douglas County Youth Center to do three main things: an assessment stabilization facility, which would be a secure type facility, but it would be used, like it sounds like, for a 30-day stint for youth that need to be assessed before they go to their next placement. It would also contain a unit that waiting placement. You've already asked questions about those youth waiting placement. Why are they in detention? Is there some other type of way that we can handle those type of youth? And then also a 30-bed secure residential facility for males. They have one for females, but this would be for males so that we could get them out sooner. There have been discussions whether that's a PRTF or some other type level. Option B was a little bit different because we weren't really sure at the time. We looked at all the data if we needed the assessment center. So this would increase the number for those youth awaiting placement unit to 30 male youth and a secure residential placement. And if you want more details on those, we do have more details. These are preliminary discussions. I want to stress on where they felt they could meet some of the needs of our community.
Thank you, Kim. And as mentioned, they're pitching this to us. This is not something we sought after, so, but we're gonna go ahead and mention it since it is something that was pitched. The last option is the state of Nebraska has expressed an interest. There is no actual negotiation happening, but they've expressed an interest in the downtown facility here at the corridor. And so this would be through Department of Health and Human Services, specifically as a YRTC facility. So instead of sending kids to the Kearney YRTC, they would keep their state youth here in Omaha. So they've expressed to us that anywhere between 60 to 70% of their youth are from Douglas County and from Omaha. So they would prefer to keep those kids in their community here in Omaha, Douglas County. So that's a part of the idea. What else? Of course, their focus is also youth rehabilitation as well, which is, and they like the notion that the building has kind of therapeutic environments to it. What else? This would then have the county maintaining youth at the current DCYC that Ronnie's in charge of, and then the state would lease the facility that is downtown. So that is the gist of the state option. So with that being said, we're gonna have a dialogue on all the options and the facilities in general. And we're gonna try to squeeze in as many people as possible. So if you're passing the 4-minute mark, I might have to take us to the next person. Commissioner Rogers?
Thanks, Roger. Let me go. I'm gonna say my piece and then I might have to leave to go to the funeral. So let me begin by adding some more context to the first part you said, particularly about the original piece of the facility. So as you noted, it was 2018. So in 2018, the law passed that a kid could not sit in detention. That's what the piece was made on. Then you had a year to get there. And then of course, COVID hit. But then we came back. I mean, there was monies brought in for alternative services, and then there's discussions that happen about trying to restructure some programming to make us more, to make us better to accommodate some kids at predisposition. Now, you know, in that point, the numbers that happened when it went down, I mean, at one point, this was after COVID to some degree. The number was somewhere overall in there between 50 and 40. So I say that point to say, you know, when the attempt was made to say that the number goes down and wait for it to go down naturally, that number doesn't go down naturally. But when the county started doing reform in 2026, it was a combination of the late Brad Ashford, Lathrop, Chris and those guys, and it was, and actually Coach, all the relevant state entities and Judge Halligan, to his credit, that actively put in policy to make that number go down. I say that in respects to that number won't organically go down. The one thing the board does control is the capacity of the place. So it was always the intent to bring that place down with the programming. Now luckily as the chair said, the building got put together and it was under budget 5 million, where we didn't need to use that 5 million. But no, the philosophy too of the foundation was, okay, so we probably need to look at it from the back end. What do we need to do to fund the alternative so we can free up that retention? So what I'm saying is, everything that can happen when it was on track as far as the detention was based on the fact that the state law is in place. The law is not being implemented. If the law is implemented, you have stuff to do there, and if there's some structural changes, in my opinion, that can be made internally, then you're able to get down to that number. But the fact too is that, you know, every place in the system needs to move to make that happen. So in regards to the promise to get there in the 3-year period, we still can get there to some degree. I absolutely believe that. And it's obvious when you look at these numbers, when you look at the length of stay. So the last speech before I go is, Mary maybe doesn't remember this, but, before the state comes in with the YRTC, I'm open to that, but I don't think it can happen here. Because the agreement here is that this had to be a joint city-county ballot. That's like the law. That's what was there in the bonds to make that happen. So you're limited. I do believe in the YRTC, but I think from the YRTC discussion, I do know there's some members of the court that want to have a better discussion, because in my view, the court doesn't trust YRTC now. So if YRTC was to come here, there needs to be a big discussion about how it fits for us and how it fits specifically in regards to those services. I do like rites of passage, and I am open to that wholeheartedly. But I do note that the number won't go organically. We have to make a decision, and I believe you gotta make a decision to move them, because the goal always was to make the move and convert the old building into a service that's needed. And at some point to do that, you've gotta cap it, you gotta hold it, and you gotta make some other people adjust. And so, that's my perspective for this funeral. I wish I could get it from the dialogue, but I gotta go from that point of view. So I just wanted to.
Thank you, Commissioner Rogers. And just before you leave, the law change that the provision you're specifically talking to, I don't want to misquote you, so can you clarify that piece real quick?
To me, the law says that he cannot sit in detention for lack of placement. And to me, that's clear and unambiguous. Now, there's some conversation that, I remember being on the JDOT call, and it was a judge from the county saying stuff like, well, kind of saying, well, the law doesn't say this. To me, there's nothing in that law that's clear that a layperson could read there. So what I'm saying is, and my question always is, who's enforcing the law that the kid doesn't state? The law didn't say you can't move for lack of money. The law said the kid can't sit there. And so nobody's pushing that piece up. And that's what I mean. I mean, everybody's pushing this piece in here when you look at the numbers of kid on the technicality. The greater piece is the county needs to do its piece on disposition, but to me, the lowest hanging fruit, which is clear in the statute, is that a kid can't sit there for lack of placement. When you got 90 so days there, that's the issue. In the past, when the law was passed in 18, it was based on the fact that you thinking people are going to adhere to the law, and the law is not being adhered to.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure we got that part clear from your perspective. Thank you so much, Mr. Rogers. I know Frank and Kevin, I had a hand up, and then we'll go back here. Bishop Frank?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, it's good to see the turnout. Thank you all, for being here. The input and the information is very important. We need it. I'll talk to Chris later about it, but he made some decent points, but there's a couple of separate items that we've been wrestling with and fighting with for quite a while. One is capacity based on state criminal code and directive. What the county actually has responsible for based on state directive and the criminal code associated with it. Juvenile criminal. Separate item is the county's ability to help in the arena, in that particular arena and outside of that arena, meaning outside of that arena would be programmatic. What the county's responsibility is in that regard. That's why meetings like this are important, and other meetings will be too. The programs are important, of course, because we as elected officials are doing, we can empower, we can help, we can guide some of the folks into those programs with those community partners. Those are integral. But it's very important to note, and I'm not lecturing, I'm saying, I've had Congress, Chris is probably tired of me, Commissioner Rogers is tired of me saying it. It's very important to note that Douglas County is statutorily responsible. Douglas County is statutorily responsible for appropriate capacity based on state law, interpretation of that law, and judicial directive. We have to provide capacity. So Chris can say that we're violating state law somewhere, but we're not. The county's not. If we were, we'd get sued because everybody else is suing us for a variety of different reasons. Let's just put that on the table. The state law, interpretation of that law, and judicial directive. In a significant way, these dictate what those numbers look like on a consistent basis. 92 youth in there this morning. Was that the county's 92 youth in there? I'm not advocating authority here. I'm saying there's reasons and there's directives as to why those numbers are what they are. Now, that being said, one way or the other, Douglas County's statutory responsibility begins and ends at capacity. Deciding who we're going to work with is very, very important. That's going to help those numbers. But the magic Harry Potter line waving it and saying we need to force these numbers down to 64 because that's what this building holds. It's not realistic. You cannot go tell a judge what he or she is going to do. We are obligated statutorily to provide that capacity. Finally, what I know is the two facility issue is viable, but it's expensive. And we need to map that out. It's viable, but expensive. It's financial, it's programmatic functionality being implemented appropriately so that we can say, we've got these two facilities, but the programmatic functionality is there. We're going to utilize that. We're going to help guide people to it. And then the unknown or the future crime data. We don't know. But to Commissioner Rogers' point, I don't want to hang him out. I'll talk to him about it later. Like I said, we don't have a crystal ball. I don't know. When this county grows, crime grows with it in a variety of different ways. You don't have to be a criminologist to figure that out. The other thing is, from a state partnership standpoint, the YRTC, and I know that there are problems with the YRTC, but to Roger's point, to Commissioner Garcia's point, 70% of those post-adjudicated youth are from Douglas County. They're being shipped out to crime. Their families don't see them, if they have families. Their families don't see them. You're going to drive 3 hours, and if you get out there, how long are you waiting? What does that look like? So I'll sum it up. The YRTC is a viable option as well. Why are post-adjudicated youth less important than pre-adjudicated? They're not. We have options available to us. We want that input. I have diarrhea in the mouth. I'm not trying to filibuster this. I just wanted, this has been 4 years that I've been analyzing this. And the good thing is I haven't heard the same old thing in this meeting. I've heard the same old thing in a lot of different meetings. We're looking for options. We're looking to help youth. We think that there are options out here available to us. We think we can do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Friend. After Commissioner Kavanaugh speaks here, I do want to give a quick clarification on the bond issue and possibilities that exist with revising the bond and also with the law provision that Commissioner Rogers spoke to. But first, Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thank you. Going back to the beginning, the Chin study that initiated this entire process recommended not to build a cell block downtown like the kids' jail. It said build a campus facility like we have on 42nd Street. We explored and presented to the board a comprehensive plan with a budget and a timeline to do that at a fraction of the cost that the empty kids' jail ultimately resulted in. And that was not approved by the board. So instead of a campus that would look like a high school, junior high with security next to a golf course, we have a virtually windowless, no direct sunlight in the cell block with a postage stamp AstroTurf basketball court on the roof. It's empty. We have the largest increase in our mill levy for property taxes to pay for the bonds. I oppose this entirely, mostly because the 64 maximum of the kids jail as built was woefully inadequate, and you can see from the numbers that we have here, rarely if ever have we even been in the area of 64. 64 is maximum, but if you put one female child in there, that takes out 8 cells, 8 cells of an entire mod. And so if you have 9 females, then you have 16 cells that are taken out of the general population. We currently run a 90% male, 10% female population at about 90. So you can do the math. It was 0.9 that these numbers would not be in that facility. The argument was, well, we will using the which the programs are there, and I commend those that have worked on them. Reduce the population. Look at the numbers, and consequently, when it opened, there was no possibility average daily population into the kids' jail. So it's sat empty, expensive from its inception. And all of this was discussed in detail at the county board, in public hearings, in town halls. It was known to all that this would not work from the beginning. And yet this magical thinking that a change in state statute would compel the independent juvenile court to do something different with the jurisdiction of these children continues to this day. There's nobody here, I don't think, from the juvenile court, no judge. Oh, I'm sorry, there's one. But they don't have the duty to follow the county board's dictates relative to the incarceration of children. So the magical thinking that somehow we would build a facility that we thought was adequate and the courts would trim their incarcerated children number to fit that was never realistic. The number of children that we've had has always remained in that 80 to 90%, 80 to 90 child category with overwhelming minority majority. There was talk here how it tracks with the demographics of our community. Not at all. 62% Black in a community that I think might have 15%. 18% Asian and 12% Hispanic and 92% minority is not Douglas County, Nebraska. Never has been, and I don't know that in my lifetime if it will be. But we've done nothing to impact that. That's been the case since the beginning of this discussion, and it remains the case, if anything, more pronounced today.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, I'm not done.
I needed to be.
I have one more point.
Okay.
We have options here to fill up an empty space that's costing us a lot of money. And I think that the best probably is the state option. I commend Chairman Garcia and those that have discussed this with the state to pursue that, because we need to be held harmless on an empty and expensive building that we can never use for the design purpose. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Kavanaugh. Super quickly, because I want to get more voices in, on the bond matter. So the bond that we took out for this entire facility, including the Justice Hall and the detention center, has certain provisions that are tied to it that limit what we can do with the facility, including the youth detention facility. So the bond legal counsel that we've gotten thus far from our bond attorneys is that it can be revised, but it has to be of similar usage, right? So a YRTC that still serves youth, that are still Douglas County youth, is very likely still a similar use, versus we could not lease that corner to CVS or Walgreens. Like, that would not be allowed under the bond legalities, right? So there's certain parameters around the bond, but at least from my perspective, the legal counsel we've gotten thus far is that it can be revised, but it has to be similar usage. As far as the 2018 law, I just want to say, and I'm not a lawyer, but from the lawyers I have talked to about those interpretations of that law, yes, a youth cannot be detained for lack of placement as a starting point. But youth are detained first for the crime that was committed, the infraction that was committed. And they have that touch point with the justice system. A judge or probation or a combination, determines at one point that they are to be detained. And at that point, that's where the data here where it says, now the youth has been authorized to be released, and now they're waiting for a psychiatric facility or a shelter. So in that scenario, yes, the youth was not detained for lack of placement, they were detained for a criminal infraction. And now they're in a situation where they're waiting for a proper placement. So there's two different things there. And I don't know if I explained that well, but the interpretation is slightly different from what Commissioner Rogers said. So the ones that are detained currently and are waiting placement, I don't think that's illegal per se. But I will let the legal minds debate that a little bit more. But I just wanted to throw that piece in. Quick note on my end. So I'm glad we're having this dialogue. There's going to be more dialogues coming up soon, and I'm going to invite community partners to those dialogues. So first on the programming versus detention, because we heard a few good points about, let's focus more on programming than detention. Yes, 100%. That was a big piece of what Commissioner Cano was saying in 2020. If you look back at the videos of many of these videos, of these hearings, that's what I was saying as well. So even though right now I'm having to deal with the practical reality of budget constraints and all that stuff, yes, if you look back at what I was advocating for 5 years ago, I said, let's focus more on intervention, prevention, getting the kids on the right path early instead of investing millions of dollars into a building. And that was a big part of my 2020 campaign. So that record is out there, right? Even though you're hearing me deal with the building matters now. So I'm on board with that. I get it. I have also asked the question that if the goal was there to create robust programming in the next 3 years, back in 2018, what happened? What happened? Why did that programming in a multifaceted way, why did it not happen? Why did we not see, dozens of programs coming out and reducing those numbers? And that's what I mean when I say naturally or organically. And I know Commissioner Rogers doesn't like when I say that, but when I say that the numbers should be reduced naturally or organically, I mean that there's robust programming in the community for all high risk to low risk and everything in between happening that lead towards the numbers being reduced naturally or organically. That's what I mean when I say that. Okay. And so I agree. And I have asked the question, what happened? Because those programs did not come to fruition. And there's also World Herald articles that cite, yes, we're going to have a new program at Omaha Home for Boys, the Child Saving Institute, all of which did not happen. So again, my style is typically not to point fingers, but I just want to lay all the cards out because we're having a good conversation and we're keeping it real. Okay. So I have posed those questions, but now I also have to deal with the budget reality. If we had the money to pay for the second facility and we had those extra $7 million, I'd say, okay, we have the money, let's do it. Let's put it to good use. It is a nice facility, but we're going to maintain the first facility as well because we need that capacity. But we have to deal with that budget reality that we don't have those extra $7 million, which is why we're looking at all the options right now, including the state option and others. I do commit. Well, let me take a step back on the building again. I have also said a building, whether it's this nice new building or the slightly older building that Robbie does a great job at running, a building is not going to solve our community issues. A building is not going to solve our societal issues that we have when it starts within the family, in our communities, all gang affiliations, access to assault weapons, all the systems that are involved from school to criminal justice, everything. A building is not going to solve all that. And I'm sorry, that's just my opinion. You can disagree with me, but that's why, yes, I want to find a solution for this whole facility debate, but whatever option we pick, we still need to have our focus on community and programming and actually reducing these numbers through intervention and prevention, Cause I'm sorry, walls are not gonna solve the issue, in my opinion. And so, I do commit to having very soon meetings that are open like this one, focused on what is the gap in programming that we need to fill collectively. I'm talking about everybody, nonprofit partners, private providers, school system. I wish we had more engagement from the schools, and I'm not saying that's their fault. I think we need to reach out to them better, and then hopefully they engage as well, because our kids spend a lot of time in school. Sometimes issues start at school, but there's also community issues, there's household and family issues, there's a lot. It's not gonna be just the county board, it's not gonna be just one provider, it's gonna be all of us collectively trying to solve these issues and getting the numbers down, okay? So yeah, I'm also passionate about it as well. My background is in juvenile justice. I've actually had case managed families myself. I've been to court with families. I worked at Boys Town when I was case managing families. I've worked with families that are also in Health and Human Services system as well, and some of them that were dually in both systems at the same time, okay? So I just want you to know my background, because it's the first time I'm working with some of you. And when you speak from a community context, I come from a community context. I ran multiple Latino centers and nonprofits, and that is the kind of work I was on the ground doing for a long time before becoming commissioner. So I'm with you, while also having to deal with budget issues and legalities as well. So sorry for the soapbox there. Let me squeeze in Willie.
No, we're tight on time. I really appreciate, again, this forum that you all have created, and to have the commissioners in the room, to have community in the room. And hopefully you can see, look around the room, the community partners that are here, we're as invested as anybody. And we are here. We want to jointly come up with solutions. A couple of things I just wanted to emphasize. One, when we work together, I'm thinking about, this is a snapshot that gives us an idea. Last summer, everybody anticipated was going to be a terrible summer. We had 0 homicides. Non-fatal shootings were at the lowest, I think, in 15 to 20 years. Lower arrests, and you can keep going down the list. So through collective work and being very solution focused, we can get there. I have no question about it. This is not imposed. We can figure this out. One. So solution focus is really where I want to go with this. We have for 3 years within 360, with many of the partners in the room, really focused in on what can we do around juvenile justice? How do we support? Kim and her team for the last year, I think, did a lot of work around where are the gaps. We have polled, we have surveyed, we've identified what those key gaps are. I think with the additional information, commissioners, that you can provide to us, what I would love to see is understand the timing of when the decision needs to be made. And secondly, I would like to put on the table that the community, when you're talking about 92% of these kids and families are people of color, 64% African Americans. I would propose to the commission that you give us an opportunity as a community to put something on the table, just like rites of passage is put on the table. And it may be a part of rites of passage, but I would like to put on the table that these groups that have been doing tremendous amount of work in partnership with the county have the opportunity to also put something on the table of a formal recommendation to the county as well, with your engagement. So one, solution focus. There's no question we can do this. We have brilliant minds in this room and others that want to participate. I believe we're right at the point right now, because of the openness that everybody seems to have, that we can come up with a solution that makes sense. And then we have to back it up with the piece that you talked about, Commissioner, around financially. How do we make it sense? If we bring all these partners to the table, I know we can get this done. And just want to enforce the passion that you have, Commissioner, your passion for this. That community is just as passionate. 92% is totally unacceptable, and we know that we can do better, and we've shown in other arenas that we can do better. So I want to put on the table that we would like to also make a recommendation of how we can jointly use our community partners to address these issues that have been identified over and over again.
Yeah, thank you, Willie. I will add to that the additional context, and then I'll get to the Zoom here. So to the credit of our philanthropic partner, there is a bucket of funding for the programming side of things. And not that the whole bucket is available for, just doing something brand new, because some of it has been allocated, but there is a certain amount of funding that could be allocated towards programming if we strategically identify where we can intervene and do better prevention as well. And so that side of funding and that side of brainstorming and collectively coming together to make change is the easier side to come together and to invest and to do collectively. The building side, of course, I'll put any option that comes to us and I'll put it on its own slide as well. Though remember, the bond legalities and the budget problems that come with that, so, you know, it's a $130 million bond, we're paying millions every year to try to pay off that bond. Plus, we gotta keep it to a very similar usage per the bond parameter. So that part's a little harder to say, yeah, let's just put like a community center in there. Like, that's probably not gonna happen, right? But, by all means, we will address both again at the next meeting. But the programmatic side, the intervention side, and seeing where the gaps are there, that one is definitely something I want to start addressing with everyone right away. While we continue the brainstorming on the building side, the facility side, and all the complexity involved there. I do want to say that, you know, this summer, the board has to make a decision on the facility side of things. The programmatic side, it's going to be a continued effort for multiple years to really get these numbers down and really intervene strategically together. So let me stop talking there, and Ms. Monroe, I see a hand up.
Yes, hi. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I just had a question regarding maybe some clarification that can be made on where maybe the and I don't know if disconnect's the correct word, but where we're running into why we don't have more prevention and intervention programs. I mean, I know you just talked about it, Chairman Garcia, just regarding like trying to bolster that. Is it because the county isn't pushing for that? Is it because probation isn't taking on other programs that would be able to take more youth? Is it because the judges aren't using all of the resources? Or I just want to know like where, you know, because I've heard from community programs from places that I have, you know, from sources that I've talked to, that they are trying to get youth from probation into their system, and there's just some type of disconnect where that's not happening.
Yeah, so different ways to tackle this, but probation has done a great job of working with community partners, going to Omaha 360, giving a presentation on how to become a partner and contractor for probation. And Mary, you can speak further because I don't want to speak for you, but they've done a good job of reaching out because it's a process, right? You need to become a contractor with either the pre-adjudicated side or the probation side to provide services for youth. And of course, we want to verify that that service will be one that will be good for the youth. And so there's a process to it, right? And so there's pre-adjudicated services, there's probation post-adjudicated services, but there's also very early intervention and prevention services out in the community as well, like a soccer club that gets first graders or fifth graders out in something pro-recreational as opposed to just, you know, not having something pro-recreational for youth. That's just one example of the many of things that we as a county board, we're not in charge of all prevention and intervention in the community. We're in charge of pre-adjudication. School system has their services as well. That's why I always make the emphasis that it's going to take all of us coming together collectively and seeing where the gaps are and what we can do collectively to address those gaps, because all of us have a piece of the pie and we need to make it whole coming together. But that's just my perspective. I don't know, probation or anybody else wanted to add. Right.
So you guys spoke about being organic, and so when I look just down this table, this line, and this one, we have to be very targeted at who we're going to identify to be those service providers, regardless of the probationary thing or whatever, because Boys and Girls Club, I don't know if they're a service provider or not, but that's just, like you said, early intervention, prevention. So be intentional on who you are giving these kids to. We know it's 96. We know that those services are right here at this in this room, and it's possible. So the same thing that Willie just said, organic. So let's be targeted and be intentional. That's it.
Thank you, Ricky.
You know, because of the community programs in this room and the collaboration of what's happening both in North and South Omaha and our partners in West Omaha, you're sitting in one of the safest counties in a city of our size in the United States because community and law enforcement work together. We can do the same thing here, and you do that on the Tech Challenge. This was always supposed to be a two-step dance. Programs first, lowering the number of folks that could be in these buildings. We know that we can do that because we've done it every summer since the Empowerment Network has been in process. So it's a funding issue on the first side on these programs. There are partners doing this for free every single day in this community who know these kids, who these kids respect, and over history are the ones they're going to listen to going forward, right? And so I just want to make sure rehabilitation is the focus of this conversation and not incarceration or punishment. Rehabilitation for youth is the key, and community is the key to that. We've done it in our school systems, these community public-private partnerships. The funding is there. You let us know that there's funding available. You let us know what the gaps are. And these people in this room have filled that. We have a history of success in that area in the city.
Thank you, Wayne. Roscoe, and then back there.
I'll be real brief.
Yeah.
And you did say you keeping it real, right? Okay, let's keep it real. Restorative justice is about stakeholders. I see everybody in this room as stakeholders, county, probation, community partners. You talked about probation coming to 360, educating us on that need. I know about that. I dealt directly with Shep on these numbers years ago. It's what made me come out of the prisons and focus my energy towards these youth. I've created a team of community people to help with that. I seen and I identified a lot of things that was happening with their probation. I seen automatically through my expertise of going through this, that we're doing some of the same things that we've done before. Case management services will get us out of this. Matching the people up. Yes, Project Harmony, Bridge, all of Boys Town. There's a place for certain kids for those places. But we're talking about kids that I sit down and talk to the chief about. A 5% that's wrecking the city. Can we get those providers, those experts, those specialists to focus in on those kids? But what I found deterrence from that. I'm not gonna throw anybody, but we're being real, and if we're gonna do this together, we have to empower each other. So I'm not about going against anybody, but when I see something that ain't right, and I know I'm an expert in that, to hell with where I come from, or if you don't like me, we got a situation where we're giving kids to people that we've been dealing with, but we're not getting no results. That's why years ago I asked, what is the metric? Who's recording the success, the efficacy of a program? Everybody can tell you I had 100 come in last year. Can anybody tell me the efficacy of that 100? And I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Roscoe. And go back. Oh, sorry. Let me get the Bam back there, and then over here.
So I manage a program for pre-adjudicated youth. We go into the prevention programs as well. And we have not received referrals. I don't know if it's the political climate or what, but referrals continuously decrease to the point that we have not received one referral this year to any of our programs, despite reaching out and everything. So I hate to be in a room and hear that there's no programs, and there's programs that I've talked to 5 different organizations within the last 2 weeks, and none of us are receiving referrals. So how can we help the kids if we're not getting the referrals? And there's only like 1 or 2 places. I'm standing in the pre-adjudicated. That side is covered with the adjudicated. We're not trying to jump into that, but we're not getting the service. We're not getting youth to our programs. So it's becoming an issue. Funding is, we're getting hit for funding being taken and everything because of this. And then we can't just walk out on the street and just get the youth. So how can we get that conversation, get those people to the table?
And what is your provider name? I'm sorry.
I'm with the Center for Holistic Development.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Thank you. and I'm not saying this is the reason or the only reason, but it might be a contributing factor somewhat that, this year we've seen moments in time throughout the months where there's actually more adult detained youth than juvenile pre-adjudicated youth. And so that might contribute to the amount of referrals overall. I'm not saying that's the reason or the only reason, but it might be a contributing factor back there.
I wanted to say too, I was kind of looking at, rites of passage and all these different, organizations that have, gotten these contracts for years. And I can tell you as a youth, myself from, 10 to 18, I was in Boys Town from 10 to 16. And Boys Town was a lot different back in the 90s where you lived in, these homes with two house parents. You worked on the farm, you kept a job, you played sports, and I would thrive in those certain places. You got a lot of people from the community that were family teachers in Boys Town during those times. And then, after I left Boys Town and went into foster care, when I went to, the detention center in, Lincoln, I just sat in the cell. We could go and, work on our GEDs or whatever the case, but I didn't really thrive. So I respect what you said earlier, Commissioner, about, sitting in those walls where there may not be a lot of programming. I can remember going to Geneva, being on a farm. It was very institutionalized for the 30 days to see if I was gonna go to Carney or go back, to foster care. So, and going back to what Roscoe said about, restorative justice, a lot of our kids really need to be restored, and an environment has a lot to do with it. I can tell you I volunteered the past 6 weeks with 360 and seeing how some of those kids have come along just in an amazing way. A lot of these kids don't have, father figures, or some don't have mother figures, and just to have people around them that they recognize and that they can relate to makes a huge difference. Just good example, and I'll be done. I had family teachers in Boys Town for 4 years, and they decided to leave. After they left, my brother and sister both graduated, I started to decline. I wanted to leave, So when you don't have that consistency of people that that love and care for you, you're gonna decline. And just being in a place where, you're going to jail, it's not helping the whole recidivism and everything else because you go back. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And by the way, if I have never been to your program or your facility or your nonprofit, I would love to go. So please email me and I will go personally visit your program. We got back here, then Zoom.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tanika Meese. I'm the founder and executive director of North Omaha Community Partnership. We have a juvenile program called the Blueprint that is supported by Douglas County Stability Services. And we work with pre-adjudicated youth, post-adjudicated youth, and we also work with youth that are not a part of the juvenile justice system and referred by their parent or guardian. An issue that I have seen with going to court with these youth is that 9 times out of 10, they are referred to a group home. And I have seen where they have been referred to the group home by the county attorney and the probation, and they have not utilized community services in town. And these are facts. This is not speculation. This is not a onesie twosie. These are facts the majority of the time. And so they're being held in DCYC because there are no group homes that will accept them, either because they, like with Radius, I've been told from Radius, well, we don't have enough IEP educators, and most of our youth in here are on an IEP program and we can't support it. So it's not that we wouldn't be willing to take them, it's because of staffing issues. And then I've been told, well, it's because it's a safety risk. And so it's the youth is the reason why they can't be accepted into the program, or because the programs are full. And so you have youth that are being sent out of state. I had a youth that sat in DCYC, and it breaks my heart. He sat there for about 5 months, waiting on placement, and it was challenged. His autism diagnosis was challenged, even though it was originally assessed and diagnosed by Monroe Meyer. And so while he was still sitting there, the judge ordered another evaluation to get a current diagnosis. He was indeed autistic with interacting with him, you can tell that he was held in, like the confinement, because they said he didn't get along well with others. Well, he was autistic and he had an issue with getting into his personal space. And so, not having staff that can deal with youth that has these, different disabilities, is an issue. And so they're saying, oh, well, he's not opening up to the therapist. He's not talking, he's autistic.
Right.
And so instead of him being able to come out into the community with the community supportive services and being back home with his family, which his family lives, out on 132nd and 4th. He's not in the hood. He wasn't in a gang. He just had issues with his behavior, with closeness. Okay. That was a trigger for him. And so this young man is now in Arizona. Okay. He's now in Arizona, away from his family, away from his support. And tell me, how is that going to help him? How? And so we are constantly running into issues like this, and we have to face these issues and be truthful about it. There has to be another way. Group home is not the answer, but it seems to be the common answer when we are in court with these youth. Group home, group home, group home. What are we gonna do? Because the group homes are not accepting them. Okay, so I'm trying to open up a group home so that we can keep our kids here and work with them here. But then we also run into financial difficulties because when we start working with these kids and working with these families, guess what? They're in the middle of a crisis. You got the mom working 2 jobs and doing hair on the side, so she can't supervise her children properly. An economical issue. They need help with rent. Every family I'm working with right now, and there's literally 17 right now, they need help with rent. They need help with utilities. They need help with food. They need that help. And so we have to direct funds, allocate funds towards providing that. And so I'm like, look, the money that I get, I pay my staff salaries, but I also use that money to help these families. So my reimbursement for the services that I give, it goes back to the families. But there has to be a better way because even that's not enough. So we gotta have some hard conversations and we gotta do it more frequently. And we gotta get to the bottom of it and make some changes real fast, or we're gonna continue to lose.
Thank you, Tamika. We're gonna, Mark, I will do you real quick and then we do have to wrap it up here.
Okay, just a couple of quick things. The 92%, that's of minorities in the facility. That's a one-day snapshot. If we look back over the past year of 2024, we were just under 80% of the population being minorities. And we're always looking for programs that can assist the youth. The most important thing for what we see with our youth is getting them connected with the program before they leave and giving them the opportunity for their parent to be involved with that program. That seems to help with regards to how soon a young person comes back, if they come back at all. And one of those programs is with the Omaha Police Department that comes 2 to 3 times a week and engages the youth and communicates with them and bring them opportunities to recognize them as people instead of as someone that's bringing them in. And that's had a wonderful effect. We also have a career fair, a couple of those a year. So if individuals are looking for ways to help young people, the opportunity to be involved with a career fair is that opportunity. And the last thing, right now, our number of IEP students is 34%, which is about a third of our population. And the good thing is that's going low. Most days our IEP students are between 45 and 52%. So, there's always different challenges. We do have a school. We do have a mental health department. We do have a clinic that's here. So we're always looking for things to help young people. And if there are programmers out there who are interested in trying to make a connection, I would invite you to reach out to me and we'll take a look to see if and how that program can be connected to help our youth.
Thank you, Mark, and I see Commissioner Borgeson has a hand on Zoom.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not feeling very well today, so that's why I'm not there, but I wanted to add to what the community is saying because I hear many of those same sentiments from providers that we have willing providers out in the community that are willing to have court-ordered placements, but that's not happening. Or if they are a provider, they are not getting referrals. And I know a number of those providers that have sat there with with no referral. So what I would suggest is that we be the catalyst to pulling these community providers together and find out who they are, what they have to offer, and what the barriers are for them not getting referrals or them not becoming a provider. Because as many of them said, there are willing, ready and able providers out there, and we are not utilizing them. And I think that that would make a tremendous impact on the number of children that we are holding in the youth center for placement out of this state. And so I ask that we do that either through the Child and Youth Committee or just as a separate meeting altogether. But I think that's very important to do so everybody understands what's out there and what's not being utilized. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Borgeson, and my apologies to everyone for going 22 minutes over the time frame here. But thank you for the dialogue. We will continue these dialogues. I commit to doing another meeting in June. So give me a few weeks to get everything together and we will continue these conversations. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, that makes sense. Being a half hour. Yeah. You got.